Hello, everybody. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and Evolution Revolution. And we are reading Neale Donald Walsch's Conversations with God, Book 2. And we meet every week, and everybody's welcome, and you can invite anybody you want to. And Michelle Harvey is going to read, and I don't remember where we stopped, so somebody else is going to have to.
I've got it on the PDF anyway. The page is probably different. On the PDF, it's the top of page 94, and it says, "It is not a question of blame, it is a question of choice."
Does anybody else have a book that they're looking at?
Here, Bosco.
Anybody remember?
Who just said here, Bosco? You heard? I'm talking to my dog. I just thought I was muted.
I have a dog named Bosco too. That's just
Oh, how funny.
You thought you were having a extrasensory experience there.
Great minds think alike.
That's great.
That is amazing.
Are we in chapter 9? Is that?
Yes, it's page 125. The last sentence says, "Still in highly evolved societies, this is exactly what is done."
That's not what I have.
Yeah, that's not that's not my page number either.
No. Before we finished the last meeting last week, I actually took a note of exactly where we were, and that's not what I have.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and my page numbers are different, but the line you just read is not the same.
Okay.
Well,
it's still on the same page, Michelle. What you said and what we just said, yeah, it's on the same page.
Good. That's good. Thank you, Angela.
all right. Well, why don't we go ahead and start, and I'll figure it out as we go.
Okay. It is not a question of blame, it is a question of choice. And if you are not responsible for the choices humankind has been making and keeps making, who is? Well, we can't make ourselves responsible for all of it. I tell you this, until you are willing to take responsibility for all of it, you cannot change any of it. You cannot keep saying they did it and they are doing it, and if only they would get it right. Remember the wonderful line from Walt Kelly's comic strip character Pogo, and never forget it. We have met the enemy, and they is us. We have been repeating the same mistakes for hundreds of years, haven't we? For thousands of years, my son. You've been making the same mistakes for thousands of years. Humankind has not evolved in its most basic instincts, much beyond the caveman era. Yet every attempt to change that is met with scorn. Every challenge to look at your values and maybe even restructure them is greeted with fear and then anger. Now along comes an idea from me to actually teach higher concepts in schools. Oh boy, now we're really treading on thin ice. Still, in highly evolved societies, that is exactly what is done. But the problem is, not all people agree on these concepts, on what they mean. That's why we can't teach them in our schools. Parents go nuts when you try to introduce these things into the curriculum. They say you are teaching values and that the school has no place in such instruction. They are wrong. Again, based on what you say as a race of people that you are trying to do, which is to build a better world, they are wrong. Schools are exactly the place for such instruction, precisely because schools are detached from parents' prejudices, precisely because schools are separated from parents' preconceived notions. You've seen what has resulted on your planet from the passing down of values from parent to child. Your planet is a mess. You don't understand the most basic concepts of civilized societies. You don't know how to solve conflict without violence. You don't know how to live without fear. You don't know how to act without self-interest. You don't know how to love without condition. These are basic understandings, and you have not even begun to approach a full comprehension of them, much less implement them, after thousands and thousands of years. Is there any way out of this mess? Yes. It is in your schools. It is in the education of your young. Your hope is in the next generation and the next, but you must stop immersing them in the ways of the past. Those ways have not worked. They have not taken you where you say you want to go. Yet if you are not careful, you are going to get exactly where you say you are headed. So stop, turn around, sit down together and collect your thoughts. Create the grandest version of the greatest vision you ever had about yourselves as the human race. Then, take the values and concepts which undergird such a vision and teach them in your schools. Why not courses such as understanding power, peaceful conflict resolution, elements of loving relationships, personhood and self-creation, body, mind, and spirit, how they function, engaging creativity, celebrating self, valuing others, joyful sexual expression, fairness, tolerance, diversities and similarities, ethical economics, creative consciousness and mind power, awareness and wakefulness, honesty and responsibility, visibility and transparency, science and spirituality. Much of this is taught right now. We call it social studies. I'm not talking about a 2-day unit in a seminar-long course. I'm talking about separate courses on each of these things. I'm talking about a complete revision of your school's curricula. I'm speaking of a values-based curriculum. You are now teaching what is largely a facts-based curriculum. I'm talking about focusing your children's attention as much on understanding the core concepts and the theoretical structures around which their value system may be constructed as you now do on dates and facts and statistics. In highly evolved societies of your galaxy and your universe, which societies we will be talking about much more specifically in Book 3, concepts for living are taught to offspring beginning at a very early age. What you call facts, which in those societies are considered far less important, are taught at a much later age. On your planet, you have created a society in which little Johnny has learned how to read before getting out of preschool, but still hasn't learned how to stop biting his brother. And Susie has perfected her multiplication tables using flashcards and rote memory in ever earlier and earlier grades, but has not learned that there is nothing shameful or embarrassing about her body. Right now, your schools exist primarily to provide answers. It would be far more beneficial if their primary function was to ask questions. What does it mean to be honest or responsible or fair? What are the implications? For that matter, what does it mean that 2 + 2 = 4? What are the implications? Highly evolved societies encourage all children to discover and create those answers for themselves. But that would lead to chaos. As opposed to the non-chaotic conditions under which you now live your life. Okay, so it would lead to more chaos. I am not suggesting that your schools never share with your offspring any of the things which you have learned or decided about these things. Quite to the contrary, schools serve their students when they share with young ones what elders have learned and discovered, decided and chosen in the past. Schools may then observe how all this has worked. In your schools, however, you present these data to the students as that which is right, when the data really should be offered as simply that, data. Past data should not be the basis of present truth. Data from a prior time or experience should always and only be the basis for new questions. Always the treasure should be in the question, not in the answer. And always the questions are the same, With regard to this past data which we have shown you, do you agree or do you disagree? What do you think? Always, this is the key question. Always, this is the focus. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Now, obviously, children will bring to this question the values of their parents. Parents will continue to have a strong role. Obviously, the primary role in creating the child's system of values. The school's intention and purpose would be to encourage offspring from the earliest age until the end of formal education to explore those values and to learn how to use them, to apply them, functionalize them, and yes, even to question them. For parents who do not want children questioning their values are not parents who love their children, but rather who love themselves through their children. I wish, oh, how I wish that there were schools such as the ones you describe. There are some which seek to approach this model. There are? Yes. Read the writings of the man called Rudolf Steiner. Explore the methods of the Waldorf school which he developed. Well, of course, I know about those schools. Is this a commercial? This is an observation. Because you knew I was familiar with the Waldorf schools, you knew that. Of course I knew that. Everything in your life has served you, brought you to this moment. I have not just started talking with you at the beginning of this book. I have been talking with you for years through all of your associations and experiences. You're saying the Waldorf school is the best? No. I'm saying it is a model which works given where you say as a human race you want to go, given what you claim you want to do, given what you say you want to be. I am saying it is an example, one of several I could cite, although on your planet and in your society they are rare, of how education may be accomplished in a way which focuses on wisdom more than simply knowledge. Well, it is a model I very much approve of. There are many differences between a Waldorf school and other schools. Let me give an example. It is a simple one, but it dramatically illustrates the point. In the Waldorf school, the teacher moves with the children through all levels of the primary and elementary learning experience. For all those years, the children have the same teacher rather than moving from one person to another. Can you imagine the bond which is formed here? Can you see the value? The teacher comes to know the child as if it were his or her own. The child moves to a level of trust and love with the teacher, which opens doors many traditionally oriented schools never dreamed existed. At the end of those years, the teacher reverts to the first grade, starting over again with another group of children and moving through all the years of the curriculum. A dedicated Waldorf teacher may wind up working with only 4 or 5 groups of children in an entire career, but he or she has meant something to those children beyond anything that is possible in a traditional school setting. This educational model recognizes and announces that the human relationship, the bonding and the love which is shared in such a paradigm is just as important as any facts the teacher may impart to the child. It is like homeschooling outside the home. Yes, it is a good model. There are other good models? Yes, you are making some progress on your planet with regard to education, but it is very slow. Even the attempt to place a goals-oriented, skill development-focused curriculum in public schools has met with enormous resistance. People see it as threatening or ineffective. They want children to learn facts. Still, there are some inroads, yet there is much to be done. And that is only one area of the human experience which could use some overhauling, given what you say as human beings that you are seeking to be. Yes, I should imagine the political arena could use some changes too, to be sure. That's the end of chapter 9.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see here. Hi, Christina.
Good morning. My Zoom took about 4 or 5 minutes to look in today. I don't know if it's my computer or if it's Zoom.
I'm not sure, but Friday there was a huge cyber attack.
Oh.
And it affected people from all over the world.
Oh.
And we were using Zoom on Friday, and it was not working right at all. So I'm glad that cyber attack has been resolved.
Well, what I'll do is after this meeting, I'll reboot my computer, and that should maybe resolve the issue.
Yep.
When in doubt, reboot.
Yes, when in doubt, reboot, or do a disk cleanup, or any number of things. And I just found. Okay. I was thinking about all of us come in contact with children, whether they're our own or whether they're friends' children, or pardon-moi. Yes? I'm on a phone call. If honey will make it for you. If you make a mess, there might be circumstances or consequences. Speaking of children.
Exactly.
I love Piper.
Yep, she's something else. And what I was going to bring up here was actually, my page numbers are not the same as yours, but it's after that long list of understanding power, science, and spirituality, not the next page, but the next page, where it says, okay, so it would lead to more chaos. And God brings up that the treasure, always the treasure should be in the question, not in the answer. And I was reminded of the time when I was reading the book, The Secret. I also saw the movie, but I was reading the book. And at one point in the book, it says, imagine that a spaceship comes and lands right in front of you on a coffee table or wherever you're sitting. And it is a spaceship called All Knowledge. And you can only ask the spaceship one question. And in the book it says, do not answer this immediately. Think about it for a couple of weeks and see where that idea takes you. Well, for 2 weeks, every question I came up with, I felt like I could philosophically, through much reading, I could say, well, I know the answer to that already. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly, because do I really know, or do I know because of things I've read? Or is it a feeling I have? And for me, it was a feeling I had. Like if I would say, I never did ask one question. But if I were thinking, like, will I see my parents again when I cross over? I felt in my heart, well, of course you are. So don't waste your question. But that night, my then son, or he's still my son, Casey, who was probably about 10, was sitting in my desk chair, and I said, hey, I have a question for you. I said, but I don't want you to answer it immediately. And he was spinning in my desk chair, and I said, could you please hold still? I want you to think about this. And he goes, oh, come on. I said, okay, imagine a spaceship comes down, lands right in your lap, and it knows the answer to every question on the universe. And I don't want you to answer it right away. I want you to think about it. What would you ask the universe? He goes, oh, I know what I would ask. I said, but no, you got to think about it. You got to give it some time. And he said, no, I absolutely know what I would ask. And I said, well, I'm not going to win this, so what are you going to ask? And he said he wanted to know what happened to the lost tribe of the Roanoke people. And I was like, who? What? And I've never even heard of the lost tribe of the Roanoke people. I didn't know they were lost. And so Casey explains to me in 9 or 10-year-old terms that this tribe of people that had come from the UK on ships, and I can't remember how many of them, but it was a good number, a couple hundred people, landed on Roanoke, which I think is an island. Don't know my geography that well. But anyway, they landed there, and they were beginning to run out of food, and they needed to return to the United Kingdom to go bring more staples back to Roanoke Island. And Casey says, and when they came back, which was over a year later, all those people were gone. They were just gone. There was no evidence like skeletons or, there was just no evidence of what happened to these people. So I said, well, get up out of my desk chair. I gotta fact check your. And so I looked it up, and sure enough, what he had told me was basically right on. But I think the thing that threw me and takes me back to this thing about the treasure is in the question is every question that I was going to ask the spaceship had something to do with me. And here was this 9 or 10-year-old kid. He wanted to know about these lost people that had, even though we're all connected, but it had nothing to do with himself. And so I try to remember those moments with my granddaughter as well, who popped in here, is that these questions that our kids ask, I think, show that we are changing, maybe not as fast as we would like to be as a society with our kids, and getting them to respond and use their brains and be independent. Anyway, that is all I'm going to say on that. I have to take you off mute, I think, if you want to respond.
Well, it is interesting that, if you look at how different we are than we were 100 years ago or 200 years ago, we're still educating our children in the same way. And I like what Gary Douglas says in Access Consciousness is live your life in the question. Yeah, if you look at the school classroom that I was familiar with in the 1950s and 60s, if you go into a school today, it looks the same.
Yep, many of them do. And I'm now, my kids are out of school now. And the last place my youngest son went to school was very different. I mentioned it last week. They'd learn math sitting in a tree, and they'd bring that somehow together. I wished I would have known about that school way before I did, because I think it would have made a big difference on how my son accepts education, because he's kind of anti-education. He likes to educate himself with music and poetry and stuff like that, which is good, but he doesn't want to go to college, and I wish he would. But what I want and what he wants, that's his journey, this is mine. What was the name of the person again, Christine?
Gary Douglas in Access Consciousness. And, really, there are schools now that where I live in Victoria, British Columbia, there's a huge First Nations community, and we've got all these Gulf Islands around, and there are schools now, because traditionally, they learn very differently, and they learn from nature, right? Like nature is their classroom, and so there are schools now that are changing to, let nature be the classroom for the students, and so that they can learn how to be responsible and caring. And, it's happening more and more, and you're right, but it's still, there is a huge resistance to letting nature be the teacher.
Has anybody, no, I don't know anybody that has had a child go through Waldorf program.
Diane?
Let me take you off mute, Diane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I don't have anything good to say about Waldorf. My son went through 10 schools or systems, including a free exam. I repeated the Waldorf twice. The second time he did first grade. And for the first year of secondary school, which would be like the 9th grade. And they are the two schools that have thrown him out, expulsed him, definitely, including one Montessori. My worst attempts were with the alternative school. The first Waldorf had a sheep in the yard, was very small, and I really thought that we would have some result. It was a second school for first grade. I have all the respect for Rudolf Steiner, and I think the system as it is described by Neil would be marvelous. In Chile, at least, they haven't succeeded to do that. Because there's a theory, and there's the need to fit, and to respect, and finally to have children who don't ask. We are really afraid to have them thinking by themselves. I think it's the worst obstacle we have, and I'm not throwing the fear on others. I absolutely take it on myself. We're not ready for that. So it reflects in the school education. Maybe there are other countries which are not as narrow-minded as it is in Chile, where it has been possible. I just have the worst opinion of it. It was part of the damage to Bastion. It was part of what added to it. Sorry.
Well, it's all the person who is the teacher, right? And it sounds like that the person that was with your son both times, or the different people, they were having their own agenda instead of resonating to what Bastion's agenda was.
Well, Bastion has been too much for everyone all the time, and all the professionals, they're always throwing him in at me. And as a mother, I didn't handle it well because I wanted to protect him, but I also wanted him to adapt in the system, and the result is a mess. But the issue here is not Bastion, is our incapacity to deal with that kind of freedom and to open. And of course, as parents, it's very difficult when we are against the old system. And it can drive the mother crazy. And it did. But when God says that always the treasure should be in the question, I think it is the hardest truth. And we really would have to put our mind on it. And there's too much work to do as societies. Really too much work to do. I'm glad to hear, Christine, that in Vancouver, things are different. I often wonder if I had been back to Canada, if things would have been different for him. But I'm not sure neither.
Well, and this is just a movement that's, beginning, because, our First Nations children were being lost, and they're by trying to, they think it's polite to sit at the back of the classroom, and, they were just being lost. And now by letting them be in nature and, letting nature be the teacher, they're finding themselves and they're gaining confidence, you know, my friend Harrison Klein, who, you know, his parents were through the Holocaust and everything, and he just saw so much in his early life. He just shut himself down. And then I think when he was 30 or 35, kind of an act of grace pulled him out. He doesn't know how long he was gone or anything, but, you know, he's really a very funny, conscious man. And there's a summit coming up, I think, in the next week or so. And it's about, you know, the richness of children that are autistic or different and nonverbal, how the richness of their life, and how as parents and as a society we can respect them and include them, and let what they have to show us blossom and flower. Because, you know, Harrison is a prime example of that. And yeah, he's incredibly funny and just an open-hearted person now. But he was not safe for the first 30 years of his life to open his heart. And it was an act of grace that kind of yanked him out of his body and, you know, brought him back, and so that he could respond, because it's a kind of autism. Maybe somebody can help me, you know what it's called. Anyway, it's a label. It's a label, and you know, labeling our children isn't necessarily a heartfelt response to them either. It's not honoring their uniqueness. I'm complete.
Tammy, did you have your hand up? Okay. I see. I don't know how you figured that out, Michelle, because I was trying to show everybody how to raise their hand.
There's something on the bottom where it says participants, and it shows the list of everyone on the call. Mm-hmm. And on the bottom, it says raise hand.
On the bottom, I don't see that.
Yeah, right there, raise hand. And then now that I've raised my hand, I can click lower hand too, if I want to put my hand down. There's also something down there that says mute me.
Oh, well, that's a discussion for another time.
Well, you see here on the bottom of the screen where we see each other, where it says participants?
Yes.
Click on that.
Yeah, I've got that list open. I just don't see the raise
on the very bottom of it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You're lucky. Anyway, your hand was up.
Lucky this time. No, I just wanted to make a comment that, you know, my experience with the schools, having raised 2 children, is that not all, for example, Montessori schools, not all Montessori schools are created equal. So just because a school is Montessori, from one Montessori school to another, there are very stark differences. Some of them, I think, are absolutely superb. Others, not so. And, you know, it could be also the same with Waldorf as well. That I don't know. I don't have that experience, but I'm just saying that in general, you know, Maria Montessori, for example, you know, had a fabulous idea about how to educate children, because the Montessori school basically caters to the child, very much so, that they are learning what interests them at their own pace, and they're being guided, but it's a much more flexible curriculum. And I just wanted to make the point, though, that not all Montessori schools are the same. They're different. And also that with one of my children, we sent him to a school where for 2 years in a row, the child would keep the same teacher. So like, let's say, for example, for 1st and 2nd grade, it would be the same teacher, you know, and then it would switch. But just having that extra year with a teacher, you know, I agree that, you know, that is a really great bonding experience, because you think about how often you're in an environment with other people and you're focused on learning something, but you leave that environment knowing very little about the people that you were actually there with having that experience. You know, there's so much that we can all learn from each other, not just the topic that's being taught and our input on that topic, but from one another, period. So just to make it, you know, the opportunity for things to be more inclusive and, you know, and then again, different teachers have different teaching styles and depending on how flexible the teacher is and how flexible the child is. I would suppose that if you had a teacher that was not the best for your particular learning style, or you had a bit of a personality conflict with that teacher and you couldn't get over it in a year or so, it might be good to switch to another. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any one size fits all approach to education, but I think that all of the things that were listed in what we just read would be great to be part of any curriculum. So I'm done.
I agree with what you say. No two schools, no matter what schools they are. Like, I went to Catholic school, and I've had a couple odd experiences, but, you know, not like what I grew up hearing. You know, like nuns walking around with rulers, and never saw any of that. And then I even tried Catholic school for Casey, and about once a week, the priest who taught his catechism class would call me and say, "He did it again," and I'd say, "He did what?" And he says, "He stumped me." He goes, "I didn't know what to say to him because his question was so, or his statement was so innocent that I couldn't say, well, that's not exactly how that works." And he just said, you know, he's got a good questioning mind. And one of the questions he asked was that he thought it was pretty weird that Catholics didn't believe in reincarnation because Jesus came back from the dead. And he said he couldn't think of a way to explain this to, I don't remember how old he was, but probably in that 9 or 10-year-old zone again. And then when 9/11 happened, the priest had all the kids that following Friday in the church, and they could ask any questions they wanted to, you know, talk about any concerns they had. And the priest had a microphone. And so Casey had his hand up. Now, mind you, I was not there. I was usually there when Casey would throw a rock and break a window, or throw a ball and hit a car window. I was not there for this. But I had several parents call me that night to tell me what Casey said in church that day. And he had his hand up, and the priest called on him, and Casey said, the priest had said, "Does anybody want to tell me in their own words what happened on," I think it was a Tuesday. And Casey raised his hand. He said, "Two very sad men did a very bad thing." And the priest said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, they were sad. You wouldn't do anything like that if you weren't sad." And everybody else was talking about all the bad men. And I just remember I had several parents call me, and whatever else Casey said had these other parents in tears because he had it all kind of figured out. And basically what he was saying is that we all need to get along, which is why we're all here in this book group, is because we're trying to figure that out for ourselves. But anyway, as far as I took a class in high school, private, all girls, Catholic, very liberal. I took a class in a high school called Music Appreciation on the Waterbed. And we laid on a waterbed and had these stereophonic headphones listening to classical music. Now, I'll let you guys guess what time frame that might have been. But, you know, we all learn differently. And anyway, anybody else want to add something?
Well, your experience on the waterbed sounds like a 1970s version of the current float house.
It was the 1970s. Yes, it was. Oh, me oh my oh. And me getting in trouble by the nuns in the bathroom smoking cigarettes. But what can I say?
Shame on you.
I know. I don't know why I didn't think they couldn't smell it if I waved this back and forth really fast. But alrighty then. Okay, should we read a little more since we've got 20 minutes, or does anybody else have anything to add? Okay, Michelle. So this would be chapter 10.
Yes.
Okay, and I'll keep my eye on the clock because at about 5 minutes, I have a couple of announcements.
Chapter 10. I've been waiting for this. This is more of what I assumed you were promising me when you told me that Book 2 would deal with planetary issues on a global scale. So can we begin our look at human politics by my asking you what may seem like an elementary question? No questions are undeserving or unworthy. Questions are like people. Ah, good one. Okay then, let me ask, is it wrong to undertake a foreign policy based on your country's own vested interests? No. First, from my standpoint, nothing is wrong. But I understand how you use the term, so I will speak within the context of your vocabulary. I'll use the term wrong to mean that which is not serving you, given who and what you choose to be. This is how I've always used the terms right and wrong with you. It is always within this context, for in truth, there is no right and wrong. So within that context, no, it is not wrong to base foreign policy decisions on vested interest considerations. What is wrong is to pretend that you're not doing so. This most countries do, of course. They take action or fail to take action for one set of reasons, then give as a rationale another set of reasons. Why? Why do countries do that? Because governments know that if people understood the real reasons for most foreign policy decisions, the people would not support them. This is true of governments everywhere. There are very few governments which do not deliberately mislead their people. Deception is part of government, for few people would choose to be governed the way they are governed. Few would choose to be governed at all, unless government convinced them that its decisions were for their own good. This is a hard convincing, for most people plainly see the foolishness in government, so government must lie to at least try to hold the people's loyalty. Government is the perfect portrayer of the accuracy of the axiom that if you lie big enough, long enough, the lie becomes the truth. People in power must never let the public know how they came to power, nor all that they've done and are willing to do to stay there. Truth and politics do not and cannot mix, because politics is the art of saying only what needs to be said and saying it in just the right way in order to achieve a desired result. Not all politics are bad, but the art of politics is a practical art. It recognizes with great candor the psychology of most people. It simply notices that most people operate out of self-interest. So politics is the way that people of power seek to convince you that their self-interest is your own. Governments understand self-interest. That is why governments are very good at designing programs which give things to people. Originally, governments had very limited functions. Their purpose was simply to preserve and protect. Then someone added provide. When governments began to be the people's provider as well as the people's protector, governments started creating society rather than preserving it. But aren't governments simply doing what the people want? Don't governments merely provide the mechanism through which the people provide for themselves on a societal scale? For example, in America, we place a very high value on the dignity of human life, individual freedom, the importance of opportunity, the sanctity of children. So we've made laws and asked government to create programs to provide income for the elderly so they can retain their dignity past their earning years, to ensure equal employment and housing opportunities for all people, even those who are different from us, or with whose lifestyle we don't agree. To guarantee through child labor laws that a nation's children don't become a nation's slaves, and that no family with children goes without the basics of a life with dignity, food, clothing, shelter. Such laws reflect well upon your society, yet in providing for people's needs, you must also be careful not to rob them of their greatest dignity, the exercise of personal power, individual creativity, and the single-minded ingenuity which allows people to notice that they can provide for themselves. It is a delicate balance which must be struck. You people seem to know only how to go from one extreme to the other. Either you want government to do it all for the people, or you want to kill all government programs and erase all government laws tomorrow. Yes, and the problem is that there are so many who can't provide for themselves in a society which gives the best life opportunities routinely to those holding the right credentials, or perhaps not holding the wrong ones, who can't provide for themselves in a nation where landlords won't rent to large families, companies won't promote women, justice is too often a product of status, access to preventive health care is limited to those with sufficient income, and where many other discriminations and inequities exist on a massive scale. Governments, then, must replace the conscience of the people? No. Governments are the people's conscience, outspoken. It is through governments that people seek, hope, and determine to correct the ills of society. That is well said, yet I repeat, you must take care not to smother yourself in laws trying to guarantee people a chance to breathe. You cannot legislate morality. You cannot mandate equality. What is needed is a shift of collective consciousness, not an enforcer of collective conscience. Behavior and all laws and all government programs must spring from beingness, must be a true reflection of who you are. The laws of our society do reflect who we are. They say to everyone, this is how it is here in America. This is who Americans are. In the best of cases, perhaps, but more often than not, your laws are the announcements of what those in power think you should be, but are not. The elitist few instruct the ignorant many through the law. Precisely. What's wrong with that? If there are a few of the brightest and best among us willing to look at the problems of society, of the world, and propose solutions, does that not serve the many? It depends on the motives of those few and on their clarity. Generally, nothing serves the many more than letting them govern themselves. Anarchy, it's never worked. You cannot grow and become great when you are constantly being told what to do by government. It could be argued that government, by that I mean the law by which we've chosen to govern ourselves, is a reflection of society's greatness or lack thereof, that great societies pass great laws, and very few of them, for in great societies very few laws are necessary. Still, truly lawless societies are primitive societies where, might is right, laws are man's attempt to level the playing field, to ensure that what is truly right will prevail, weakness or strength notwithstanding. Without codes of behavior upon which we mutually agree, how could we coexist? I am not suggesting a world with no codes of behavior, no agreements. I am suggesting that your agreements and codes be based on a higher understanding and a grander definition of self-interest. What most laws actually do say is what the most powerful among you have as their vested interest. Let's just look at one example, smoking. Now the law says you cannot grow and use a certain kind of plant, hemp, because so government tells you it is not good for you. Yet the same government says it is all right to grow and use another kind of plant, tobacco, not because it is good for you. Indeed, the government says it is bad, but presumably because you've always done so. The real reason that the first plant is outlawed and the second plant is not has nothing to do with health. It has to do with economics, and that is to say, power. Your laws, therefore, do not reflect what your society thinks of itself and wishes to be. Your laws reflect where the power is. no fair. You picked a situation where the contradictions are apparent. Most situations are not like that. On the contrary, most are. Then what is the solution? To have as few laws, which are really limits, as possible. The reason the first weed is outlawed is only ostensibly about health. The truth is, the first weed is no more addictive and no more a health risk than cigarettes or alcohol, both of which are protected by the law. Why is it then not allowed? Because if it were grown, half the cotton growers, nylon and rayon manufacturers, and timber products people in the world would go out of business. Hemp happens to be one of the most useful, strongest, toughest, longest-lasting materials on your planet. You cannot produce a better fiber for clothes, a stronger substance for ropes, an easier-to-grow harvest source for pulp. You cut down hundreds of thousands of trees per year to give yourself Sunday papers. So how can you read about the decimation of the world's forests? Hemp could provide you with millions of Sunday papers without cutting down one tree. Indeed, it could be a substitute for so many resource materials at 1/10 the cost. And that is the catch. Somebody loses money if this miraculous plant, which also has extraordinary medicinal properties, incidentally, is allowed to be grown. And that is why marijuana is illegal in your country. It is the same reason you have taken so long to mass produce electric cars, provide affordable, sensible health care, or use solar heat and solar power in every home. You've had the wherewithal and the technology to provide all of these things for years. Why then do you not have them? Look to see who would lose money if you did. There you will find your answer. This is the great society of which you are so proud. Your great society has to be dragged, kicking and screaming, to consider the common good. Whenever common good or collective good is mentioned, everyone yells, communism. In your society, if providing for the good of the many does not produce a huge profit for someone, the good of the many is more often than not ignored. This is true not only in your country, but also around the world. The basic question facing humankind, therefore, is, can self-interest ever be replaced by the best interests, the common interest of humankind? If so, how? In the United States, you have tried to provide for the common interest, the best interest, through laws. You have failed miserably. Your nation is the richest, most powerful nation on earth, and it has one of the highest infant mortality rates. Why? Because poor people cannot afford quality prenatal and postnatal care, and your society is profit-driven. I can cite this as just one example of your miserable failure. The fact that your babies are dying at a higher rate than most other industrialized nations in the world should bother you. It does not. That says volumes about where your priorities are as a society. Other countries provide for the sick and needy, the elderly and infirm. You provide for the rich and wealthy, the influential and the well-placed. 85% of retired Americans live in poverty. Many of these older Americans and most people on low income use the local hospital emergency room as their family doctor, seeking medical treatment under only the most dire of circumstances and receiving virtually no preventive health maintenance care at all. There's no profit, you see, in people who have little to spend. They've worn out their usefulness, and this is your great society. You make things sound pretty bad, yet America has done far more for the underprivileged and the unfortunate, both here and abroad, than any other nation on earth. America has done much. That is observably true. Yet, do you know that as a percentage of its gross national product, the United States provides proportionally less for foreign aid than many much smaller countries? The point is that before you allow yourself to become too self-congratulatory, perhaps you should look at the world around you, for this is the best your world can do for the less fortunate. If this is the best your world can do for the less fortunate, you all have much to learn.
I'm going to stop you there. And I see that Michael Gregory joined us. Michael Gregory, long time, no here. Hope you are well. Okay, thank you, Michelle, for reading.
You're welcome.
And I find it interesting that oftentimes when we're doing this reading, and obviously with no knowledge from Neil at the time these were written, and talking about the political issues, I know every country has them. Ours just seem to be center stage right now, at least politically. And I couldn't agree more with what God said here. So, isn't that interesting little synchronicity business there? Because I can't remember what it was last week, but there was another major synchronicity last week. And, but anyway, I want to wrap up here real quickly because tomorrow is Global Oneness Day. I'm sure if you're on our email list, you probably received 724 emails about Global Oneness Day. Anyway, it begins at 8:15 in the morning at Los Angeles, California time. And if you go to the Global Oneness Day 2016 website, which if you Google it, you'll find it, you can find all the information. It's a 13-hour program, and everybody from Deepak Chopra, Neil, Barbara Marks Hubbard, Gene Houston, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Patricia Cota-Robles. I could go on, but then we would be here for another 8 minutes. But anyway, it's going to be a great day, and it's a lot of work. We were trying to figure this out, and I said I don't want to really know because I'm so exhausted. But we're trying to figure out how many hours goes into planning Global Oneness Day every year, and we just decided to say thousands of hours because I don't keep a time clock or punch a card. But anyway, it'll be a great day, and it'll be a great celebration and reminder that we are all one and that we are reaching a tipping point. And I remember one call where Neil was explaining to us the tipping point was something that we weren't really following or getting. But I do think we're getting there, and I know Global Oneness Day, a telesummit is not the only way to get out there and do things. But what I was thinking is when we are listening tomorrow, if you choose to listen, and then there's free 2 days to listen in again after the telesummit. If any ideas come through to you for things to do for our Awakening Day, it'd be really, we might hear some great ideas. So we're going to do that. And then I don't really have anything else to say except for thank you guys, and I love you. And I would like to say to Christine and Angela, are you both going to be around this afternoon at all?
Yes, I am. I'm going to make some green tomato jam, so I'll be in my kitchen. Okay.
Well, if I just put together a 3-way call, maybe in an hour or so, Angela and Christine are helping with this long day and working, helping to produce the call and put fires out, as it were. And
I'm going to send you an email with my Skype address, and maybe we can become friends today on Skype because I don't see you in my contact list. Okay?
Well, you're in mine.
I know, but Angela's not in mine.
Oh, Angela isn't.
Yeah, no, you're in mine. Yes, you are. Of course, we've Skyped.
Okay, so Angela, can you send her your Skype information?
I'll send Angela an email right now, and
okay.
And with my Skype email address, and then you can respond, and we can be friends.
We can be friends.
I like your cat, Tammy. What's your kitty's name?
We can't hear you.
Unmute.
Zuma.
Zuma, I love you, Zuma. Beautiful.
All righty, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right, and I'm really working on my being consistent with the titles of the YouTube videos. So
Great.
I'm working on it, a work in progress.
With all my heart. I
I do
really
too. I enjoy it.
Love
All right.
everybody.
Love you, everybody.
Love to all of you. Thank
Okay.
you.
tomorrow
Take
in
care.
the field.
Okay.
Tomorrow in the
All right.
Bye.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Love you all. Goodbye.